Tonight, a growing battle over the future of Nashville. More than 280,000 people have now joined the fight against a proposed data center near the Nashville Zoo, making it one of the largest public pushback campaigns the city has seen in recent memory. Tonight, country star Brad Paisley is adding his voice to that debate, calling the project a nightmare scenario. Our Braden Ross has the latest.
What if you had like a diesel truck parked in your family room all the time?
That's how Ali Moresco describes her worst fear when it comes to proposals to build 2 large data centers in Nashville.
The first thing that caught my attention was the noise.
And living with a chronic illness, she's also worried about how they could impact her health.
I started to see the photos of the brown water and hear about people that live near these data centers that are complaining of like lung irritation and coughing and throat irritation.
One of those proposals comes from a company called DC Blocks, which is looking to build a nearly 70,000 square foot data center in a business park right next door to the Nashville Zoo. On Wednesday, the zoo launched an online petition against the project, which has racked up more than 280,000 signatures to date. And Saturday, country star Brad Paisley added his name to that list and took to social media to call the proposal a, quote, nightmare scenario. DC Blocks told us in a statement they've heard and appreciate the concerns and want to work with community leaders to address them. To start, they laid out several steps they plan to take to limit the facility's impact. Things like using closed-loop or waterless cooling designs to conserve water, promising to pay for all power used and any new energy infrastructure the project requires, and committing to testing and managing noise to locally required levels. But Moresco would like to see those promises and more become actual legal requirements.
What I would love as a resident of Nashville is if our council members and our policymakers would just have these data centers built responsibly.
Metro Council is considering a bill that would put significant restrictions on where data centers can be built and how they can operate here in Nashville. In Nashville, Braden Ross, WSMV.